Up next on Folks, a tribute to Martin Luther King Jr. on the 14th anniversary of his death, a look at black businessmen in the state, and a hearty welcome to radio station KJCB. That's next on Folks.
Everybody's just folks, just plain old folks. Everybody just people all over the world. Folks to live, folks got to give, folks got to care, ooh, folks got to share. Our world is small, so very small. What touches all of all, ooh, touches us all. To stay alive, just to survive, folks got to be in harmony. Everybody just folks, just plain old folks, just plain old folks. Everybody just folks, everybody just folks, just plain old folks, just plain old folks. Everybody just folks.
Hello and welcome to Folks. Tonight we start our program by going back in time to 1968. 14 years ago on the 4th of April, one of black America's greatest heroes was gunned down as he stood on a hotel balcony in Memphis, Tennessee. Martin Luther King Jr. has been hailed by the black community as being the man who brought the civil rights movement to the attention of the world. He was a subject of violence as he non-violently tried to tear down racial barriers to build a unity among all people of the universe, regardless of color. About a year before his death, Martin Luther King Jr. was a guest speaker for the Louisiana Education Association Convention. His address to the Alexandria audience was titled, "Remaining Awake Through a Great Revolution." Nathaniel Alexander is with me in the studio tonight to remember a great warrior slain in battle.
Hello, everyone, and welcome once again to this great program. At this time in the show, I'm given the honor to interpret the words of a great man, a man of many facets, an educator and a leader, the man, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And to interpret the words of this great man, there exists the need for his manuscript. At this time, I would like to welcome you in the words of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. I feel honored to be here this evening. I want to think with you on the many problems facing the state, our nation, and our world. I'd like to use as a basis for our thinking together that little story from the pen of Washington Irving, entitled Rip Van Winkle. One thing that we usually remember about this story is that Rip Van Winkle slept for 20 years. But that is not all found in that story, and almost always overlooked was the sign on the inn in a little town on the Hudson, from which Rip went up into the mountains for his long sleep. Rip Van Winkle went up to the mountain and left a picture of George III of England. When he came down, there was a picture of George Washington, the first president of the United States. When Rip looked at the picture of George Washington, he was amazed. He was completely lost. He knew not who he was. This reminds us that the most striking thing about the story of Rip Van Winkle was not merely that he slept 20 years, but that he slept through a revolution. While he was peacefully snoring up in the mountain, a revolution was taking place right here in this land. A revolution that changed the face of the nation and the British Empire. And yet Rip Van Winkle knew nothing about it. He was asleep. He snored through a revolution. One of the great liabilities of history is the fact that all too many people today find themselves living through a great period of social change. Yet they fail to achieve the new attitude, the new mental outlook that the new situation demands. There is nothing more tragic, my friends, than to sleep through a revolution. I need not remind you tonight that a great revolution is taking place right here in our world, sweeping away our old order and bringing a new order into being. We see that revolution right here in our nation. with the demise of colonialism in Africa and Asia. We see it in our own nation and in the suburbs against racial segregation and discrimination. The old order is passing away. The new order is coming into being. In order to remain awake through this revolution, we must achieve excellence in our various fields of endeavors. This is particularly important for those of us who have been at the oppressed end of the old order. And out of the difficulties we face, we've been behind so long, we've been trampled over so many years with the iron seat of oppression by the most dark and desolate days when it was a crime to teach the Negro to read and write. Many of you who have the high privileges, the divine opportunity to stand as teachers, by doing your jobs well. Most of you, not all of you, teach boys and girls every day who live with the shackles of poverty, who so often feel that they are nobody and that they don't count, who, because the system stares at them, are made to feel inferior and feel that the cards of time are stacked against them. So often it is the teacher who can give a sense of somebody, who can give them a sense of belonging. Don't be like some of the teachers that I knew when I was a student in Atlanta. They would just wait for the bell to ring. They thought that their jobs were jobs of disciplinarians rather than the jobs of educators. Teachers ought to mold these young people into a legacy of knowledge. Now, there is another thing that I was to mention here. In order to remain awake through this revolution, it is necessary for all of us to engage in a massive continuing action program to get rid of the last vestiges of segregation and discrimination. Now, my friends, this problem is not going to work itself out. Anybody who feels that racial injustices will just pass away through some miraculous force developing without hard work is sleeping through a revolution. And I'm afraid that there are all too many Negroes in this part who are dead asleep. You only need to study history of the Negro in America to know that there's nothing new about it. Think of the fact that the Negro was granted freedom in 1863 through the signing of the Emancipation Proclamation, but the Negro was not given land to make that freedom meaningful. And at the same time, this nation was given millions of acres of land in the West and Midwest. But that land was marked for whites only. America was willing to give it to new peasants from Europe, an economic source so that they could move out and lift themselves by their bootstraps. But it refused to give its oldest peasantries that kind of economic source which left the Negro with an abstract freedom. Frederick Douglass said it very beautifully when he said, "Emancipation for the Negro was freedom for hunger, freedom for the rains and bombs of heaven. It was freedom without roofs to cover their heads, without bread to eat, without land to cultivate. It was freedom with famine at the same time." We must get rid of the myth of exaggerated progress and the myth that the so-called white backlash is something new. I would also urge you to join all forces of goodwill and get rid of the myth of time. You've heard this myth of those who say, "Well, you know, it's going to take some time to solve this problem. Only time will solve it." I know that you've heard it. I hear it every day. People will say to the Negro and his white allies in the white community about the civil rights movement, "Don't push things too fast now. It takes time. You people need to be patient and continue to be nice. Continue to go on. And in 200 years, the problem will work itself out. It takes time to solve it." There is an answer to that myth, and that is that time is neutral. It can be used either constructively or destructively. I'm afraid that there are some forces in our nation today that are more concerned about winning the war in Vietnam than about winning the war against poverty right here at home. These are the things that we must see. As a result of this problem, Many other problems are developing. So, our nation's troubles of riots are caused by weapons of delay. It is necessary for us to work and to say to our nation that these problems must be solved. Let me stress that part I just said. I'm still convinced that nonviolence and nonviolent resistance are the most potent weapons available for the Negro in his struggle for freedom and human dignity. I believe, and I will go on believing, that we can solve this problem through this method that has gone too far now for us to even think about turning around. There is power in nonviolence that has a way of dividing the opponent. It exposes his moral defenses and weakens his morale. And at the same time, it works unconscious, and he doesn't know what to do. In the final analysis, the other question is, what do we hope to achieve? We want to build a society of truth, a society of justice, and that is what we seek to build. Nonviolence is the only answer. And I will only say along with this, if we're to build a better world, we must remain awake through a revolution. We must recognize that black and white alike, our destinies are tied together. In the final analysis, the destiny of the black man is tied to the white man. The destiny of the white man is tied to the black man. This is the way our nation is made. There is no point in being unrealistic about it. We've got to face the fact. Every black man is a little white, and every white man is a little black. Our music, our language, our cultural patterns, our food even, are an amalgam of black and white. So I must say to you that anybody who fails to see this is sleeping through a revolution. There is no separate black path to power and fulfillment that does not intersect white groups, and there is no separate white power and fulfillment short of social disaster that does not share that power with black aspirations for freedom and human dignity. In the final analysis, my friend, the white man needs the black man to free him from his guilt, and the black man needs the white man to free him from his fears. You know, this is the way independence is made.
Today, 14 years after Martin Luther King Jr.'s death, black entrepreneurs continue their struggle to keep their small businesses open. The civil rights movement was instrumental in forcing the federal government to help minority businesses get a foothold in the competitive and sometimes vicious cycle of big business. But after 20 years of federal help, black businesses don't seem to have made much progress.
Again, that's the problem. It's not that it's happening to the masses. As I said, we have 65,000 businesses in the state. Less than 6 or 7% of those are minority-owned. Now, they have many blacks working in businesses and in various jobs, various capacities, but owning the business, no.
It would be easy to say a black business person's problems start because of their color, but in essence, it starts because of their lack of sophistication in the business world.
In business, there are certain things that are required, basically, even before you began. A good, solid idea, not in your head, but placed on paper so that anybody can see. You need management skills before you even get started. Then, of course, you need capital. Unfortunately, we don't have those.
This lack of expertise. When you go to that financial institution, the man has to be able to ensure the fact that he's going to get his money returned, because otherwise he will not stay in business. And minorities fall into what is considered to be that, quote, high-risk category.
Bankers are very unique, and they follow a unique code. And if you take an individual who's been in the community for 15, 20 years, and they begin to check him out, they will ask you on the form, the financial form that you fill out, do you have a savings account? Do you have a checking account? At present, have you had any other place? And when you said no, then they conclude that you are not even in the habit of saving, because the financial world believes that regardless of how little money you make, you ought to be able to put at least 1 penny on the side. In our past action, our habits of the past indicate that we haven't paid our bills. We don't have a savings account, regardless of how small, because we haven't saved on a regular basis. And whatever income we've had, talking about assets, we've made money. What are your assets? We've got automobiles and furniture. We have no property, no real property. And these are the kind of things that are considered in the finance world. Not how much money you have made, but what you have been able to do with the little you have made. And it is not racism. I know most blacks don't like to hear me say that, but it's a fact. It's not racism, it's business.
Lack of finances isn't the only ingredient keeping black folks from getting a piece of the American dream. Comparisons of black businesses to white businesses have often been used to unfairly judge the quality of the black enterprise.
We started with an initial capital of $291,000, and on November 1, 1956, we opened our doors for operation. It was a little hard then because many of our people had not experienced black people controlling money, and they were a little skeptical as to whether or not we could control that money. But through the years, we proved to them that we could not only control that money, but we could be as good an association or financial institution as any other financial institution.
When black business people have to prove themselves, they usually have to compare their work to white businesses that don't even cater to the black community.
We feel that we have made a real contribution to the Baton Rouge community because we have helped tremendous people acquire homes. Many of them in the early years never would have been able to acquire homes without us being here, because they would not have been able to go downtown to the sophisticated associations and, get money. So we not only proved that we could help our people in the community, but we also proved to the majority community, majority institutions, that they had to look at our credit risk just like they looked at anybody else's credit risk. Because if they didn't make the loans downtown to our people, then we could make them up here.
The economy is another element adding to the woes of the black entrepreneurs.
There are going to be a lot of small businesses, I feel, that are going to fall. I may be one of them later on. I can't say. But it's going to take the ability of a manager or an owner of his business to more or less hang in there.
Hanging in there for black businessmen has always been hard.
A black businessman has a little harder way to go, I think. You've got to be tough. You've got to be sharp. It's not as bad as it was, say, 5 or 6 years ago, but it has its effect on you as being black. If I was white, I think I'd probably be 4 times richer than I am today, and I'm not rich today. It is terrible that a color depends on how successful you are, but I think things are getting much, much better, whereas people are looking at you now as your ability and not more or less the color of your skin.
Should also start at the bottom and start working up. In other words, start small and then build yourself. In some instances, you'll find youngsters that want to come in, but when they come in and you start showing them, how you started and where you started from and what you got to do to really learn the business, you should learn all the ins and outs of the business. It's rather hard then, because this is what they don't want to do. Most of them want to get into management right away. And in order to get into management, you must work yourself into that. Today, I feel the younger people that are seeking employment, the first thing they want to do is come in, as I said, and peak at the offset, and it's just impossible to do so. As I've said, even in this business here, when I started off as a shoe shine boy, because many years ago, only about $250 a week, But now I'm able to support my family behind it.
Well, you have to begin at an early age. As I previously stated, that if parents begin to teach their children the importance of saving, if they give an allowance of $5 per week, fine. 10% of it ought to be put on the side. And that grows up with the child because he understands and he's accustomed to saving a portion of what he has. So he placed that 10% on the side. Not at his house someplace, but in a bank. So he builds a relationship with a banker.
We have a Minority Business Development Authority now, and it's only $1 million. But it's a beginning, and we will be able to make loans up to $50,000 because we know many firms that when it comes to cash flow problems, where $10, $15, $20,000 would make all the difference in the world as to whether they would succeed or they will fail. And it's our hope that this will help, in other words, to give a brighter picture to what the minority firms are about.
If you would like more information on starting a business or just need help in making your business better, contact the Governor's Office, Minority Business Development Agency, 300 Louisiana Avenue, Suite 220, Baton Rouge, Louisiana, or call area code 504-342-6491. Tonight we would like to welcome a new business enterprise to the broadcast airwaves. AM radio station KJCB out of Lafayette made its debut recently, and already there is talk that this newest member of the broadcast family is one of the giants in radio here in the South.
Currently under a beautiful sky, it's 64 degrees, and you're at the beginning of a new tradition, KJCB.
The new sound on the AM radio band can be heard all over Louisiana, parts of Texas, Mississippi, and Alabama by tuning in 770 on the dial. New radio stations usually aren't a novelty, but this latest addition to the airwaves has caused quite a stir among broadcasters in the South. Co-owned by concert promoter Joshua Jackson and insurance salesman Russell Sashon, KJCB reaches its listeners on a 1,000-watt non-directional antenna during the day and a 500-watt directional antenna at night.
A clear channel is just what it means. It's a clear channel. It means you can go to a little cheap store and buy yourself a $3 or $4 radio and turn it on.
Turn it on to hear KJCB anywhere within a 750-mile radius of Lafayette. In layman's terms, a clear channel station has about as much signal reach as 5 regular AM stations lined up from Lafayette to Dallas.
It was about 2 months before we really knew what we had. People were telling us, do y'all know what y'all have here? And you said, well, we got a license to open up a radio station. Said, no, you got more than a license. This is a clear channel frequency. So what is a clear channel? That means nobody can come on for 750 miles.
I know. We used to go around to the DJs in the different stations just touching bases to see if we could get the good ones to come with us, you know, once we got started. And they would just turn us off just like a faucet right off the bat until we'd say the frequency we have is 770. And then their attitude would completely change.
Jackson and Sashon lucked into the powerful AM channel quite by accident when they got their license to operate their new radio station. Neither of the men had ever been involved in broadcasting before their joint venture, so when the Federal Communications Commission arbitrarily granted them a clear channel station, they were surprised and a little confused.
To be honest with you, we have no idea how we got it. We really don't. We applied for a little 50, 60, 70-mile range station for the Lafayette area, and we had planned to maybe in 4 or 5 years to come up with maybe 3 or 4 other stations in other parts of the country. And somewhere along the way we discovered we had a clear channel, and we honestly don't know how we got it, but we know we got it, and we're going to keep it.
KJCB is the only black-owned clear channel station in the country and one of only a few clear channel stations anywhere in the world. The granting of such a license by the FCC followed a 1980 Commission decision to break down the existing clear channels to make room for additional stations. Jackson and Sashon are the first to admit they happened to be applying for the right license at the right time when the FCC was looking to give a minority business a break. With Jackson's management skills and Sashon's selling power, the men say that they've hit on a winning combination that will make the clear channel music to everyone's ears.
We are black, and we involve ourselves with some things that is needed by the black community as much as we possibly can get into, but we do service all the people, not just the blacks. We service whites as well as blacks, because that's what it's all about.
We want it to be a people station because it's that's what it's for.
The beginning of a new tradition.
KJCB, Black Contemporary, serving Louisiana,
Parts of Texas,
Mississippi,
and southern Alabama with gospel,
rhythm and blues,
jazz,
Zydeco,
and complete news in French and English.
I mean, we don't have the expertise in communication, but We got about 18-wheeler load of common sense, and sometimes that's better than a real sharp education.
Again, welcome to the air, KJCB, and good luck. Well, that's about it for this edition of Folks. We're going to leave you tonight with a little bit of spring. See you next week.